Well, it's October and pumpkin season, and Halloween's right around the corner. We're here at Cleathor's Pumpkin Patch in Springboro, and they were established in 1976. I'm going to teach you how to carve a pumpkin. So there's a couple things you need to look at when you're looking at a pumpkin. The shape of it is important. If it's got any defects, pumpkins usually grow on their side. So sometimes they are leaning up against other pumpkins and they have little dents and flaws in them. The other thing you want to look at is their weight. This one is fairly light. This one right here, I picked out, it's quite a bit heavier. You want the heavier pumpkins, and you also want to make sure that they don't have any crazy defects in them. So now that we got our pumpkins picked out, let's go in and weigh them. So we're here with Emily, the owner of Cleathor's Pumpkin Patch, and she's going to help me weigh the pumpkins.
First one, 22.5 pounds.
All right, 22.5 pounds.
This one, almost 38 pounds.
Almost 38 pounds. So as you can tell, the pumpkins are fairly the same size, but they're noticeably different in weight. You want the bigger pumpkin to carve. That extra weight will transition into the thickness inside the skin, and I'll show you that later at the studio. Welcome to the studio. We went and got our pumpkins at Cleathor Pumpkin Patch. Those guys are great. Every year I go to them to get my pumpkins for carving. I like them because I can go through and pick out which pumpkin I want. No one's looking over your shoulder trying to push anything. I could pick up every single pumpkin in the pumpkin patch and pick out my perfect pumpkin. And I really like it up there, Cleathor Pumpkin Patch, since 1976. The guys are great. So we're going to start out. I'm going to show you the reason why I picked this pumpkin. I'm not going to use it to carve, but I'm going to cut it apart and show you the thicknesses on the wall, and then we'll go to this little one. I like these little pumpkins a lot for practice. They're tiny, but they're really heavy. I'll cut it apart and show you why I like these pumpkins for practicing. They're fairly inexpensive, and you got to practice. Practice makes perfect. So I'll grab my knife here, and we will cut this bad boy right in half. So as we look at the pumpkin here, this thickness right here is what you're actually going to carve. So the thicker it is, the more that you actually can go deeper into the pumpkin. That's why I grabbed this big one. This one was almost 38 pounds. This little one right here was about 22 pounds. That tells me that this pumpkin is going to have a real thick wall. So this is what you want to look at. You want this to be as thick as possible. So when you go and pick out a pumpkin, you want to pick them up, you want to feel them, and you want to feel every pumpkin. You want to weigh them by your hands and figure out which one's heavier but the same size. So we'll put that one down. Now this one was about 22 pounds. I'm going to cut this one open also and show you what we're looking at. Now we're not making jack-o'-lanterns. We're going to actually carve a 3D face into these pumpkins. Alright, so this is the thickness that I'm talking about. You want this to be super, super thick, okay? The more that you can, the thicker that you can get it, the deeper in you can carve with your tools. So we're going to go over the tools that I use. They're clay sculpting tools. You can get them at any pottery shop. You want to make sure that they're super sharp. With them being sharp, you have a tendency to cut your hands, so be very, very careful. So this is just a regular loop tool from Kemper Tools. We've got another one that's looped on one end and flat on the other. We've got another one that's looped, but then pointed on the other end. We've got some small little loop tools. And then we've got some X-Acto knives. These are for the detail. You don't want to start out with these. So now that we got the tools, we can go through and start carving. So I'm going to start out with this tool, the loop tool. We're going to do Frankenstein today. Make sure you always work off of reference photos. You can go through and just kind of make it up as you go, but with reference photos, you'll have a more accurate design, really. So with this tool you're going to go through and you're going to scrape off all the skin. You're going to figure out how big your area is going to be for your sculpture. You scrape that off first. The skin is actually pretty tough in general, so you want to get past the skin so you can carve just into the nice soft flesh that's underneath the pumpkin, which makes the pumpkin, really. The other thing that I look at when I'm picking a pumpkin is the shape of it right here. It's got a flat spot right here, flat on this side, fairly flat on this side, and then it rounds to a point. This pumpkin was growing right here on its side. That's why it's all dirty down here. And so you don't want to carve this side because it's flat, but as the pumpkin grows, it starts to push out this way, which actually is building more flesh on the inside as it grows, because the inside's, hollow. So that's the reason why I picked this side to begin with. And sure, it gets a little messy, but you can do it out in the garage or the kitchen table. Just make sure you put down newspaper or a drop cloth or something. It's kind of a time tedious project. I've sat for probably 6 hours on a project sculpting like a predator head or other pumpkins. I did a giant Slimer pumpkin one year. It was like a 137-pound pumpkin, and I took it out to the garage because it was such a large pumpkin, and I just started carving on it. And it just so happened that when the really big giant pumpkins grow, they start out green, and the insides start out green, and it's not until later on they start to turn this nice yellow color and the orange color. But this pumpkin that I had at the time didn't grow properly, and so the bottom of it was smaller because there was a drought that year. It started to grow, there was a drought, it stopped growing, and then when the waters came back up, it stopped growing down here, but then the bottom started to fill out, or the top started to fill out like this. So what I did is I cut the stem off and I flipped him upside down, and I carved him into a giant Slimer from Ghostbusters. Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to start laying out my design for Frankenstein's monster. A lot of people think this is Frankenstein. Frankenstein was the actual doctor. This becomes Frankenstein's monster. So I'm going to figure out the jawline, which will be down here, be fairly large. It'll come up. His ears will stick out. You got to think, his ears are actually in line with his eyes. So you want to know where the eyes are, right? Then you got an eyebrow, you got a big forehead, and then you got his hair clear up here. And I'll actually use this as some of his hair. Then his hair will come down jagged along the side. And then his ears will be big down here. So this is where his eyes will be. This will be his brow bone. And his nose will actually be way down here. And then his lips will be way down here also. A lot of people want to put the eyes clear up here for some reason. It's just, you know, when we're little and we're learning how to draw and learning how to do stuff, we tend to do a circle and then put the eyes at the top because that's what we see is way up high. So his jawlines are going to be way down here. Then I'll go up to his mouth. His nose will be probably right about here. Then he'll have a big long nose that'll taper down to his eyes right about here. His brow bone, big forehead, and then this will become his hair. And then these will be his ears clear out here on the side. So with that, let's get started. I like using this tool to get away, to sculpt away a lot of the bulk of it. And I can also use this to sketch out where everything's going to go. Again, remember, use reference photos. Just like I'm going to do, I'm just going to use them right off my phone. And we'll just go through as fast as I can. Get different angles if you can for your reference photos. The more angles, the better. Because then you can turn your pumpkin and look at the angle that the picture's in and make sure it all matches the same. All right, well. Let's get started. So this is going to be the bottom of his nose right here. All right. This is going to be his mouth right there. His nose is going to come up to a triangle. Everything on the eyes and the body and the face and everything is all shapes. It's all circles, squares, triangles, rectangles. So if you can remember that, you'll be a pretty good artist as far as realism. I like to do stuff as realism. I know a lot of people like to do cartoons and caricatures and kind of exaggerate the human anatomy, which is perfectly fine. I'm just not that kind of a person. I'm not really good at it. And I want to try and make stuff look as real as possible. Now remember, when you're carving, the deeper you go, the better it'll be. Now, that's why you practice on the little ones, because you'll have to learn how to push on the pumpkin and feel when you're getting too close to the inside of the pumpkin. Because then you're going to start getting into the stringiness. It almost looks like spaghetti on the inside before you get to the actual pumpkin seeds. So practice, 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 practice. So I'm kind of shaping out the brow line right now. His brow line kind of goes down like this. Then we got the nose coming down right here. And I just kind of clean up as I go. I've got a little trash can back here. I'm throwing everything away in. Underneath the nose. All right, we got the nose, and then we got his mouth right here. Over here will be his cheekbones. We'll take the reference photo and figure out exactly where his cheekbones are. If you're doing a human face, you can actually just feel your own face and find out your cheekbones are right about the middle of your nose. So I'll go across here, mark his cheekbones, kind of where I think they're going to be. All right. And then since we know from the reference and from our own faces, anything above your cheekbones are going to go in really deep, because that's where your eyes and stuff are. So then I'll use the other tool right here, the round part, and I'm going to start digging that out. We're going to start getting to the good part. Now don't go too deep too soon, because everything is kind of a guess as you work on it. And remember, you got to put eyes in this thing. So if you go too deep too fast, you're going to carve out the eye sockets, and you're going to have to do a Frankenstein that's missing an eyeball. All right, we'll come across the nose. I'm starting to put that bridge, how it comes out to the point of the nose. You got to sculpt all that into this. So as you go through, you kind of figure out how deep everything needs to be, and then start pulling everything out. Remember, nice sharp tools makes it easier to cut with. If you have dull tools, you have more likely to cut yourself because you're pushing too hard. So, you know, if you have to, if you don't take care of your tools, you might have to buy the same tool every year over and over and over because you're not taking care of them. If you are going to try and do this and you're going to keep your tools year after year, just make sure you wipe them off when you're done, dry them off, wash all the pumpkin juice off them so you can make them last longer. So we got a brow bone, we've got the nose right here. He'll have a big long lip, and then this will be the smile line right here, and then his chin will come down, and that'll be the bottom part of his chin way down here. So it's starting to kind of come together. And don't be afraid to try and sculpt with both hands. You're left and right-handed. I know some people are more left-hand dominant, some people are right-hand dominant. You know, practice. You know, it's a big part of, you know, sculpting. Practice, practice, practice. Now I can leave a lot of this brow bone sticking out because the brow bone and his nose are going to be the furthest part off of the pumpkin. His nose more so than his brow bone, so I'll go through and sculpt that back a little bit so that the nose sticks out further. But with Frankenstein, he does have a very strong brow line. That's kind of what makes Frankenstein's monster what it is. But we'll get to that as we go through. This is all about refining your sculpture as you go. You take little pieces out, you judge it. You know, how far am I going? Am I going too far? Am I not going farther or not far enough? It's constantly a balance. And if you mess up, you know, you can turn the pumpkin around, start on another side, or if you finish the one pumpkin design and you think, well, I'm going to try another one, turn it around and start on the other side. And that'll kind of help teach you and learn, you know, the different parts of a pumpkin. Pumpkins they're simple, but they're complicated. And you'll see that I'm going like this and I'm pushing on the pumpkin. Once I find out that I'm too far in, this will start getting really, really soft. But right now it's really hard. So I'm constantly pushing on the pumpkin. If I start to feel it getting soft, I know that the eyes are as deep as they're going to be able to go, and then I need to start moving everything else around to work with it. And then I'll go through with this tool later on, and I'll actually carve in those real deep lines, start putting the detail into it. But don't start with your little tools. Start with your big tools and get as much taken away as you can, you know, as fast as you can. Because if not, you'll spend, instead of 6 hours on a pumpkin, you'll be there 24 hours and you'll get tired of it. And if you're not doing it fast enough, people tend to get tired with projects. They get bored with it because it's not going fast enough. They think, oh, I should have been done, you know, 2 hours ago. And, you know, you just got to take your time, enjoy it. And you might find out that you don't enjoy carving as much as you thought you did. You know, you've seen other people do it and it's really, really fun. Oh, I can't wait to do that. And then you realize that it's a lot of work and, you know, you'd rather be doing something else. The cool thing about pumpkins is that you can also go and buy like a squash, which is a part of the same, you know, family. When the pumpkin season isn't around, and you can start carving squash. Butternut squash is fun. especially when you start getting in too deep and you start finding those little veins and the little spaghetti stuff inside of it. That'll help teach you about picking the right kind of squash as well. All right, so I've kind of got the beginning of a cheekbone. See the profile of it. You got the brow bone, the nose. This still has to go back way, way far, clear into here, and then the nose has to come back too. And then his lips will come way down into here. So we're going to start with underneath the nose. And don't be afraid to jump around. I know some people want to, oh, I got to work on these eyes. I got to get, and then next thing you know, the eyes are really nice, but you don't have anything else done. And it's been 3 hours and you've got these really nice eyes. So instead of carving Frankenstein's monster, you just carved eyes. So don't be afraid to jump around and, you know, keep the process moving a little bit further and faster. Remember, sculpt deeper, go further. You think that, oh, I don't want to ruin it. Ruin it. Don't be afraid to ruin it, because that's how you learn. Keep sculpting deeper, deeper. And then when you ruin it, you go buy another pumpkin and you learn from it. If you clean up as you go, then it's easier to clean up when you're done. A little tip for you. So right now I'm working on his cheekbones. This right here is going to be his cheekbone. You got the eye socket, the nose, the brow bone, and then his cheekbone's going to go clear out to here. But he has concave cheekbones. So I'm going to work on making those nice and, you know, skinny. So with this, I'm still looking at the picture and I'm trying to figure out his jawline. His jawline is going to come down and then it's going to point in this way. So that's what I'm trying to mark in, is how big his head's really going to be on this pumpkin. And then as I'm doing this, I can start going through and figure out where his hairline's going to be. So I can go back through and, you know, kind of carve out where I think his hairline should be. And the cool thing is that you're, you know, as an artist, you know, everything is open to artistic expression. Some people use that as an excuse to not finish a project. You know, they might start, say, Frankenstein's monster. And then they screw something up. So they got to cut his eyeball out. And they said, oh, well, it's my rendition of Frankenstein's monster. And it's actually a mess up, which is okay. But if you always tell yourself, oh, well, it's just my rendition, then you're kind of just lying to yourself. Now, one thing I like to do is do a lot of work on one side, because then I can kind of feel my way through it and figure out, you know, how deep I can really go. And then now I'm just going to try and match everything to the other side. So for the sake of time, I'm going to go through, I'm going to do an ear. I'll do a detail around the eyes, kind of touch up some more forms around the mouth and the nose. And then we'll put the bolt in the neck and consider half of him a finished pumpkin. his eyelids are almost always closed. Got him underneath. And remember, an eyeball is round, and when your eyelids are over your eyeballs, they're also semi-round. This is where the X-Acto knife comes in. You can get in really nice and sharp and carve the eyeball nice and round. You can take little pieces at a time so you're not carving too much out. That's why I like these little tools right here, so I can get inside, carve these little spots out a little easier. And the further that you carve them, you know, the deeper that you carve them, the darker the little areas will look. So you can work with highlights and shadows to kind of trick the eye into making something look more three-dimensional. All right. Just like that, you got half a pumpkin of Frankenstein. Well, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I only did half the pumpkin for the sake of time. I think it turned out all right. I hope this has inspired you to create something of your own, and until next time.